Good morning, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us for our adult Sunday school class. We're back in Paul's letter to the Romans, and so if you would please pause the video now and read verses 7 to 11 and the first few questions, and now I'm going to move into those questions. Paul talks about knowing sin, which I think can have two meanings that Paul is tying together here. The first is just knowing what is wrong. And when we know what is wrong, either by way of laws or by the way of our conscience telling us something that is wrong, or our upbringing and learning that something is wrong, that can get twisted by sin and lead us to want to know sin in the sense of becoming intimate with sin. We talked last week about how Paul said that the law tells us not to covet. And when we learn that leads us to actually covet. So Paul here is talking about knowing sin, knowing what is wrong can actually get twisted and lead us to want to do what is wrong. Question 2. Paul is providing a warning regarding a return to righteousness by way of mandatory obedience to a particular nation's laws and norms. So if Paul had insisted that the Gentiles follow the Jewish law, the Gentiles would have said, no, thank you. It would have been a roadblock to the Gentiles coming to know the God of Israel. And so Paul is saying there's not one particular nation's set of laws that everybody must adhere to. Instead, everybody is under a covenant of grace and a covenant of love. And the same thing happens when we try to set up particular sets of rules for people to become a part of the church. When we do that, we put up a barrier to people in coming and joining the wonderful work of the church. So we have absolutely no sets of rules for people to come and participate in whatever programs of the church they would like to participate in. If you would like to come and serve in the church, you are welcome to come and serve. If you need to be served in some form or fashion, and we all do, we are glad to serve you. And we don't have any particular rules that say you have to do this in order for us to serve you or to serve. The only rule in terms of membership is the rule of faith, coming to believe in the way of Jesus. And so that's the only aspect of inclusion in the sense of membership in the church. But otherwise, anybody and everybody is welcome to be included in worship, Bible studies, missions of the church, ministries of the church. There are no barriers. All are welcome. Question 4. Did the law in a way lead to Christ's death? Can we say more about how it can lead to death in our bodies? The law did lead to the death of Christ. He had, quote unquote, broken the law by healing on the Sabbath, by gleaning in the fields on the Sabbath, by forgiving the sins of the sinful. When he did that, the leaders who heard him say that accused him of blasphemy. And that, of course, was the charge against him when he was tried. The Roman law was, quote unquote, broken, as they called him a rebel and seditious. And so it was the law, in a way, that led to the death of Christ. And the law can lead to death in our own bodies as well. When we set up the moral order and knowing the moral order and perfect obedience to a moral order as the means of making things right in our life, we can end up feeling condemned because nobody can live up to the standards of Christ Jesus. And so it is by grace and grace alone that things are made right within us and around us. And of course, it doesn't mean the moral order doesn't matter. Rather, we are cleansed, made new, and given the strength and the power to better follow the guidance of the Spirit working in and through the moral order of the universe. If we hold up particular moral standards as being the means by which somebody is made righteous and somebody can be included and somebody is loved, what that does is it it excludes, it condemns. And it doesn't just condemn those who haven't been raised by loving and good and smart and wise parents, and therefore end up following patterns of sin. It also condemns all of us, because none of us live up to the standard of Jesus. And so the law, setting up particular laws as standards by which everybody must be perfectly obedient, leads to death in our own bodies. It leads to death in society also, because we end up condemning anybody who doesn't follow our particular moral standards. Anybody who isn't quite as good as we think they should be, we end up judging and condemning, and who's in and who's out. And all of this leads to death in societies as well. If you would pause the video now and read verses 12 and 13. And now I'm going to go into the last question. Paul needs to provide a final word of clarity about the law. Was it a good and holy gift of God that led to sin and death? No, it was not. What leads to sin and what leads to death is sin itself, perverting the good and holy law, something which next week we're going to hear Paul call spiritual. He says that the law is spiritual, so that the moral order of the universe has spiritual foundations and is actually a spiritual gift. The good law, the moral order of the universe, helps us how? It reveals to us our sinfulness. When we look at the standards of Jesus and what he calls us to in the Sermon on the Mount, the way that he lived his life and his example for us, all of this teaches us that we are absolutely dependent upon the mercy of God, as is everyone else out there. And so we allow mercy and grace to reign in our life rather than a particular set of moral standards. Now, of course, again, those moral standards continue to guide us and lead us. And we are drawn deeper and deeper into the way and the example of Jesus as we receive the grace and the mercy that he wants to pour out upon us. Thanks so much for listening, and have a wonderful weekend, and let us know if there's anything we can ever do for you.